each and everyone, and especially to you, ma'am. So today we will going to report the lesson 4.2, which is about genetically modified organism, science, health, and politics. So in this lesson, we will going to discuss about genetically modified organism. So for the overview of this lesson, so it will present the existence of genetic engineering, specifically GMOs or genetically modified organism in the different areas of life, the impact to humankind, and the controversies that surround them. And for the learning outcomes, at the end of this lesson, we, the students, can identify issues on genetically modified organisms, discuss the different implication and impact of GMOs, and create a research paper on the impact of the GMOs in the Philippine context. And for the materials needed, we have also gadgets, and I use cell phone. And for the duration, we have 30 minutes. So now let's proceed to our learning outcomes. So for our learning outcomes, we will going to talk about the GMO. So what is GMO or genetically modified organism? So genetically modified organism is the term used for an organism created through genetic engineering. Organism in which the genetic material has been altered in a way that does not occur naturally. So, according to the World Health Organization, they define that a GMO is an organism, either plant, animals, or microorganism, in which the genetic material or DNA has been altered in a way that does not occur naturally. GMO refers to a broadly organism that are produced when selected individual genes are transferred from a giver-donor organism into another target organism, typically empowering desired properties to the new organism. Meaning, we use GMO to create new organism, to develop a new organism. We improve certain plants, animals, as well as products and fruits. So, GMO may cause the new characteristic toward the organism. So, meaning there is a new characteristic in using GMO. So, there is the changes of the natural physical characteristic of a product like a plants, fruits, as well as the animals. So what would be the new characteristic of using a GMO? So there are increase of the size, changes of color, as well as the changes of shape. Examples of the GMO foods. So why they use GMO? So they use it for improving certain product, and as well as they use it for a business to have a big profit. So GMO also used in a food and agricultural industries. So we have here 6 to consider in using GMO in a food and agricultural industry. So first, we have the pest resistance, 2, virus resistance. We have also herbicide tolerance. We have also fortification. Number 5, we have cosmetic preservation. And the last one, we have the increased growth rate. So let's start with pest resistance or genetically modified plants to resist certain pests. So an example is the BT corn. So the DNA of the BT corn has been modified with the gene of Bacillus thuringiensis, a soil bacterium that produces protein which is toxic to corn borers. So meaning they use the gene of Bacillus thuringiensis in order to avoid the collapse of the plants like the corn. They use it in order to avoid the insects to collapse some plants. So ginagamit nila ito para maglason sa insect as well as the worms. But this is produce protein to the corn. It has also good advantage to the corn but not to the insect. So they use it para maiwasan yung pag-collapse ng isang plants or maaring makasira doon sa plants. Meaning, na-avoid nitong masira yung isang plants because yung sumisira sa plants, when they eat those crops or those product, namamatay sila, nalalason sila. It because of the gene of the Bacillus thuringiensis na in-apply nila doon sa corn. So the next one is the virus resistance. So virus resistance are genetically modified plants to resist certain viruses. So an example of this is the GMA papaya or a rainbow papaya. So the papaya ring spot viruses is known to be detrimental to papaya plants. So meaning this is only the virus that are only available to the papaya since it called papaya ring spot viruses. So the protein of papaya ring spot viruses was introduced to the papaya plant through plant tissue, which turned out to be resistant to the virus itself. The effect was like the vaccines of humans have against measles or influenza virus. So meaning they store certain viruses. It makes plants less susceptible to disease caused by such viruses, resulting in a higher crop yield. So, malalaman natin na ang isang papaya ay mayroong or ginamitan siya ng GMO kapag siya ay kaaya-ayang tignan or fully orange siya. But there are papayas that mix with color like orange and green. But we will know if the papaya use a papaya ring spot virus, if the papaya will look orange as well as it will look fresh or kaaya-aya. So they use the papaya ring spot virus because it makes the plant less susceptible to disease that caused by such virus, resulting in higher crops yields. So now let's proceed to the number 3, the herbicide tolerance. So, herbicide tolerance are genetically modified plants to tolerate herbicide. So, one of the example of this is the Roundup Ready soybean or glyphosate, an herbicide for which was introduced to soybean making intolerant to the herbicide itself. Farmers that can spray the herbicide killing the weeds but not to the soybean. So, herbicide tolerance in a plant is the ability to withstand a particular chemical herbicide. So, this allows the farmers to kill weeds while not having or harming the crop. So, it is one of the problem of the farmer is yung magkaroon ng ligaw na damo. Bukod sa they compete from the water, yung mga ligaw na damo, minsan nakukuha ng weeds or yung mga ligaw na damo yung nutrients na para doon sa crop. So they use a GMO which is it only harm for the it's but not to the plant. So nag-spray yan sila doon sa mga weeds na kung saan nagiging reason para mamatay yung weeds, but it will not affect the plants, only for the weeds. So for the number 4 we have the fortification. So genetically modified plants fortified with a certain mineral. So an example is the golden rice. So beta-carotene, a precursor of vitamin A, was introduced through biosynthesis genes to the rice, making the rice grains fortified with vitamin A. So beta-carotene is one of the needs of every individual because it is rich in vitamin A, which is good for our vision. So this is also another way to ensure that the population consume an adequate level of micronutrients like cereals, nutrients. So they use fortification in order to provide what is the needs of every individual, especially when it talk about the vitamin. So for the number 5 we have the cosmetic preservation. Genetically modified plants resist natural discoloration. So an example is an Arctic apple. So the apple variety was genetically modified to suppress the browning of apple due to the superficial damage. So from the word preservation, meaning tumatagal. So the example for this is the Arctic apple. So when we cut an apple or a normal apple, nagbo-brown siya kapag tumagal na. But when it comes to the GMO or kapag ginamitan na siya ng GMO, when we cut an apple, it will never turn brown. Hindi siya magiging brown. So meaning, they use a GMO on it. They use it for the preservation. For the number 6, we have the increased growth rate, or a genetically modified organism that has higher yield in a growth than normal species. So an example is the aqua-banded salmon. A gene from an ocean pot, an eel-like fish, was introduced to Pacific Chinook salmon, making the salmon grow faster than its normal rate. So animal can also be in order to increase their yield and decrease those possible disease that we can get to the animal. So the example of this is aqua advantage salmon. So as you can see here, you can see in the example, there is a big changes between a normal certain product and a product used by GMO. So those are the 6 GMOs in a food and agricultural industries. So now let's proceed to the GMO in non-food crops and microorganisms. So genetically modified organism in non-food crops and some microorganism involves the 6 followings. We have the food production, paper production, pharmaceutical production, bioremediation, enzymes and drug production, and the last one we have the GMOs in the medical field. So let's start with the flour production. So GMOs in flour production are seen in modified, colored, and extended base life of a flour. So from the word flour production, so it's very clear that it talks about the flour. They use also GMO in the flour production to change the color of a flour and also to extend the life of a flower. The example for this is the blue roses. They so-called blue roses, which are in the reality, it is a lilac or a purple. So the next one we have the paper production. So maybe we are familiar that some of the source of the paper is in the tree. So the example for this is the poplar trees. So lignin is a complex polymers in a trees that is removed from wood to make paper through crop process, through inserting genes that code for ferrolic acid in a young poplar trees. The lignin structure is modified, making lignin easier to break down. So they use the lignin to make a paper, and in order to make the lignin easier to break down, they use a crop process and put a ferrolic acid genes when the poplar tree is still young. For the number 3, we have the pharmaceutical production. So these modified plants to produce pharmaceutical products. Examples are the periwinkle plants. Bacterial genes were added to the periwinkle plant to enhance the production of benblastine, an alkaloid usually added to the drugs for cancer treatment like Hodgkin's lymphoma. So from the word pharmaceutical or pharmacy, so we all know that when it talk about pharmacy, it will related to the drugs. So in pharmaceutical production, they use a bacterial genes to the periwinkle plant to enhance a benblastine that is added to a drugs to fight cancer, or it is a use for the cancer treatment. For the number 4, we have the bioremediation. So bioremediation is use of modified plants that can assist in the bioremediation of polluted sites. So an example is the scrub tobacco. Nicotiana glauca or scrub tobacco, genetically modified with phytokeratin or top PC2. It is used for bioremediation. It shows high level of accumulation of zinc, lead, cadmium, nickel, and produce high biomass. So when we say bioremediation, this is a treatment of pollutants or waste by the use of microorganisms such as a bacteria that break down the undesirable substance. So for the number 5, we have the enzyme and drug production. So it is use of modified microorganisms that produce enzyme for food processing and medicine. So one example is the CG test, and another example is the artemisinin. Artemisinic acid is a compound used for anti-malarial drugs extracted from sweet or wood plant. Through genetic engineering, it can be synthetically produced by yeast and bacteria with sweet or wood plant gene. For the number 6, we have the GMOs in the medical field. So, genetic engineering is playing a significant role from diagnosis to treatment of human dreaded disease. It helps the production of the drugs, gene therapy, and laboratory researches. So, one of the example of this is the humulin. So, the genetic engineered insulin used by type 1 diabetes patients who are insulin independent. In the paper, it is extracted from the pancreas of pigs and cows that have caused allergic reaction to some diabetic using it. But in 1978, researchers from the City of Hope National Medical Center and Genetic Biotechnology Company were able to produce human insulin. The gene for insulin was inserted to bacterial DNA that was able to produce almost exactly the same human insulin. This was breakthrough in the mass production of human insulin. So in 1996, modified human insulin was provided and they called it as the Humalo. So we all familiar with the insulin. So we use it for avoiding or for our medical treatment. So now let's proceed to the benefits of GMOs. So studies show some of the potential benefits of GMOs. So first, we have higher efficiency in farming. With the use of pesticide resistance and herbicide tolerance GMO crops, there will be less use for herbicides, pesticide, and lower cost for labor and cultivation. So GMO helps the farmer to lessen their work as well as their worry. The GMO help every farmer to cause no more. So instead of using a pesticide that is not good for the health of everybody, they use pesticide resistance and herbicide tolerance. It's avoid the plants to die because of insect and weeds. So for the number 2 benefits, we have the increase in harvest. So GMO crops resistant to pests, and this is mean increase in potential growth and harvest. So yes, in increased harvest, when there is no pesticide, there is a chances to increase the harvest because no more insect will harm your plants. So for the number 3, we have the control in fertility. So it controlling the purity of the hybrid seeds or the GMO seeds ensures higher yield. Then for the number 4, we have the increase in food processing. So altered characteristic of GMO crops help ease food processing improvement of desirable characteristic. GMO offer longer shelf life, enhanced color, taste, enhanced production and reduction of enzymes and other modified characteristic of plants, animals, and microorganisms. So like what I have discussed lately, GMO will give the perfect desire of a certain organism or a product. It helps to have a long-term for organism, and especially it shows or it gives an enhancement of the color, the taste, and also the production and the deduction of the enzymes. So last one benefits of GMO is the nutritional and pharmaceutical enhancement. GMO crops like maize fortified with lysine and golden rice fortified with vitamin A and iron. There are now edible vaccines for viral and diarrheal disease. Reduce the use of fertilizer and pesticides. So yes, I already mentioned about the brown rice, which is really help every individual regarding about their health, because I said lately that brown rice is rich in a vitamin A, and also GMO crops and non-GMO crops used for treatment for different diseases. GMO helps every farmer as well as every consumer regarding about their health as well as regarding about their profit.